Tonight, a council meeting in Cork was abandoned with anti-water charge protesters chanting "Free the Five." Those five are the protesters jailed for breaching injunctions to stay away from water meter installers. Tense scenes outside Mountjoy prison on Saturday, where thousands marched about the imprisonment of those protesters. And it was there that the crowd were told that some of the jail protesters were on hunger strike over the location of their imprisonment. They're in Wheatfield prison. They want to return to Mountjoy. Well, tonight it's being reported that the hunger strike is over. With their imprisonment, our poll question tonight asked the following question: do you support people breaking the law to protest against water charges? We'll have those results a little bit later on. First, though, here's a quick reminder of the more recent protests and the government's response.
I reject your charge that the Gardaí are operating on the basis of political direction. That's outrageous.
It's the first time in this country we have a plan for water, and there's a huge volume of work necessary.
We respect the right of protest, but the courts are independent in the way they make their decisions.
If he's not released by Monday, he will stop drinking, he will take no fluid intake. Now, people, these people are putting their lives on the line for us. Stand up more than ever, support them, stop this madness, and get these blood-sucking leeches out of power now.
Well, those last images you saw there came from a protest just a couple of hours ago in Cork. So let's go live to Cork now, and we're joined by Fine Gael councillor Des Cahill. Des, you're welcome to the programme. Tell us what happened.
What happened was shortly after 5:30, a motion, our Councillor Mick Barry asked that a motion would be held. The procedure then is that we have to agree that, and then if we agree that the motion can be held on the agenda, it goes to the back of the agenda unless we vote to have it before that.
What happened? People came into the council meeting. I mean, we saw that people came in there and it looked as though they stormed the meeting.
Yeah, well, ironically, it had been agreed to hear the motion tonight. And as the discussion was about to go on to where we would have the meeting, whether it is at the front or the back, at that point they stormed the meeting, and at which stage the meeting was suspended. So ironically, the protesters were there to hear the motion to be discussed, and when we had agreed that, they then for some reason raided the chamber.
So you'd agreed to discuss this motion, which was to free the protesters, or that's what the motion demanded of you?
Correct.
So when the storming happened then, I mean, how many people came into the room?
Physically into the chamber initially there was probably less than a half a dozen, and it may be maxed at about a dozen and a half.
And what's your view in general on the protests and what's been happening in recent weeks?
Well, I suppose it's clear to point out that the five people in jail are in jail for contempt of court. They're not in jail for protesting. At the same time, I think there's an appetite there now that the protests have possibly too long, and I would ask the protesters to allow people who are trying to conduct business and sales and shops and so on, they might consider their next protest to be on a Sunday and not interfere with people who are trying to keep their businesses open and keep their staff employed. All right,
Des Cahill, thank you for joining us from Cork. Well, Ruth Coppinger is with us now. Ruth, you're welcome to the programme. What's going on with the protest tonight? I mean, what was going on in Cork? Is the hunger strike happening or not? Where are we at?
Well, in Cork, obviously I'm not based in Cork, but I'm assuming that anti-water charge protesters decided to protest there's nationwide anger about the fact that ordinary working class people have been jailed, and we all know that no bankers, none of the people who brought this country to the sorry pass that it's in have been brought to justice.
Okay, and we've heard that argument, but just bring us up to speed with what's happening, because we were told that there was a hunger strike happening amongst the people who were sent to prison last week. Is that not happening now?
Well, the difficulty is it's quite difficult to get information from those who are imprisoned out to the rest of us. I don't know if there's any relatives here tonight, but I hope that the hunger strikes don't go ahead, in the sense that we want people to protect their health. We want activists to be well. What's happening, Claire, is that on Saturday, about 10,000 people marched at very short notice in Dublin City. It was a huge protest against the repression that's taken place in communities like Jobestown, and also obviously the jailings of the 5 people. What we're seeing now is that the movement against austerity has reached a very critical time.
Is it a movement? Is it an organised movement, or is it a movement in disarray tonight?
It's far from in disarray. I mean, it's a very grassroots, organic movement. Spontaneous protests take place all the time. What I tried to tell Enda Kenny last week, there's about 350 campaigns against the water charges. You know, people make their own decisions locally about what they do, and then people come together for national large protests. And can I say that what we're seeing by the government is a sign of desperation and fear.
Okay.
There have been very strong protests in this country in the past against Taoiseach and against ministers.
All right.
But there's a different reaction now, because anti-water charges movement is so important.
Let's hear from some of those people who've been on those protests. Caroline Botkin, I'm going to come to you first. Hi, Caroline. Thanks for coming in. You were on one of the early water protests, is that right? Mm-hmm. So what's your view of what's been happening in recent weeks, indeed in the last couple of hours, with the hunger strikes being on and then not on, and what we saw in Cork?
Well, I mean, I was at the John Borton protest. We protest peacefully, you know, so we were there. A few got arrested, TD, councillors, for protesting peacefully.
Were you arrested?
No, I'm awaiting, like many others, like half a Jobestown, and we all did the same thing. We were peacefully. We were peaceful.
Are you afraid that you'll be arrested?
Well, I'm waiting for the knock on the door in the morning. I have 2 small kids, so I mean, you can look at all the footage, and everybody's in it, and everybody's doing the same thing, protesting peacefully. That's what we did, and they're getting arrested for it, and now protesting on court injunctions, and there's 5 innocent people being jailed.
Why were you there? Why were you on the protest?
I have 2 small kids, like I said. I'm struggling at the moment to try and pay me rent. I'm in a fear every month of becoming homeless. That's what I'm looking at. Can't pay the bills that I have at the minute. Can't afford any more bills.
So this was the straw that broke the camel's back in your case?
Definitely.
You just had enough?
I can't pay anymore. Can't. They're taking everything, and I just can't do it anymore. I'm looking every month. Oh my God, am I going to lose the house now because I can't afford the rent?
Okay. Anthony Casey is with us too. Anthony, you're there. Thank you for being with us tonight. Pretty extreme examples that we're talking about tonight, and what happened in Cork, and the hunger strikes and so on. But do you think it's a legitimate protest in general?
It is a legitimate protest, but I think it's gone too far. I believe it has been politicised by people on the left, and who want to bring left-wing politics into it, and the left-wing politics are basically protest politics and getting people out onto the street.
There were all sorts of people involved in this.
Was there?
Not just people who are... That's what we're hearing tonight. All sorts of people got involved in these protests, not people who are from political backgrounds or just from the left.
Well, the left, as far as I can see, are driving it. You're one of the panellists there, Coppinger, Mr Murphy and other people like that. You don't see people from Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael who are driving it. They may not agree what's going on, and the way the Irish water was set up wasn't set up very well. It's like a carbuncle on society. But the thing about it is, though, it is just left-wing people getting their vote and trying to increase their vote.
The man beside you there said you scoffed when you heard from Anthony that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil wouldn't get involved. Why?
It created it. They created the mess. That's what. They drove this country over a cliff, and that's why people are protesting. The IMF, the Troika, the whole lot has come in here and has completely ruined this country. That's who brought them in. Mm-hmm. And it's up to people like ourselves. I'm a councillor, and I'm a councillor because of what's happened in Jobestown and the likes in this country.
Not just because of the water charges. You're a councillor
because of the household charges and general.
You're a councillor because
of the household charges and general austerity over the past 6-7 years has created a tremendous Look at the backwash that's happened now. I mean, I respect this man's views. My views are completely different. I did not want to be a councillor. I went in screaming, in actual fact. I didn't want to go forward. It ended up, I had to. It's the only way.
Okay.
People have to take to the streets, and that's what's happening.
Michael Banks. Where's Michael? Michael, how are you? You were arrested in front of your children.
It was.
Was it worth it?
It was. Because I want them to have a future. You know, I don't want my children to start off married life or wherever when they have their own homes to be paying more bills than they can afford, you know.
Do you think most people, though, wouldn't understand that it's worth it, you know, to...
I'm sure it was, yeah. I mean, my young lad, he took it worse than anyone else, but I mean, I've explained to my children on numerous occasions that this could happen because I'm fighting for their future and they understand it.
And you'd be prepared to do that again?
Oh, definitely.
Patricia is beside you. Patricia, what message do you think all of this sends out internationally about Ireland?
I'm really of the opinion that it's giving a very negative opinion of Ireland, that we can break all of the rules of democracy and the judiciary. And coming from my perspective on rural Ireland, where we sink our wells, where we pay for rural water schemes, where we have always indirectly paid our taxes to contribute to water for urban dwellers, and now we see this awful disruption of decent people who are going about their jobs and applying, putting in the meters for...
Is it not democratic, though, Patricia, to go out and make your voice heard and protest in a peaceful way?
Absolutely. I have demonstrated in my time, down through the years, but it's quite a different scenario now, where it's becoming an intimidation, almost violent, almost fearful to be anywhere near where these protests may be taking place. Now, I was in Cork during a very peaceful protest, and I've seen it was not an extensive protest, but yet it was peaceful. And I actually, you know, it was jolly and cheerful. But I must say some of the scenes that I've witnessed on television and elsewhere and clips have been quite intimidating even to look at.
Sandra Fay, you were involved in protests. I know you're a teacher, aren't you, in Jobestown. Intimidating, almost violent, says Patricia. What do you say to that?
I wanted to comment on the jolly. Like, I don't know where jolly's going to get us, you know. Jolly protest, let's all sing and dance. The protest in Jobestown was a very effective protest. What's happening now, I do agree that left-wing economics is starting to run this, because we're getting politicised now and we're getting organised, and that's what frightens and scares the life out of this government. Not the fact that we sat down for 3 short 5-minute sessions when we didn't want pushing and shoving on us from the guards. These protests have been violent for years. Like, we've seen Sheld Corp where they got bet. We've seen the students in 2010, blood all over their face, unconscious. So it's okay for the guards to get violent, but if we use a bit of bad language, they're trying to separate us into good protesters and bad protesters. When I first started this, I made stupid mistakes, and this is going back a long time ago. Like, I remember being at the Ardèche and being like, oh my God, look at them putting up these barriers, and that's the photo opportunity they're looking for. I've moved on now, it's years later. I'm never going to give them that photo opportunity. Do I think when people first come out protesting, they'll learn that? Doesn't make them wrong, doesn't make them bad people. We had a great protest in Jobestown that day.
But what are you looking for now, Sandra? Because you've had a win. You've had a win. They brought down the charges. They brought them right down. They're giving €100 back when you pay over your $260. So what do you want?
We want, that's called the carrot, right? We're not buying. And the stick is putting 5 people in jail, arresting 25 people, telling the rest of us they're going to come for us. There were 700 people on that protest that day, and not one of them was violent. Children on the sideline who didn't understand trying to water balloon, and I went and I spoke to them children. I said, come on, please, your mum and dad are doing a great thing here. We're winning. We're the ones in the right. We're going to change this country. We're going to take this country back, because capitalism and cronyism is ruling this country, and the austerity measures and the poverty is what has people out now. It's undescribable, Sandra. But just waiting. Joan Burton sitting in a car for 2.5 hours is what's getting discussion. You know, that's the bottom line here.
Dr. Bill Tormey, you were shaking your head through all of that.
I think this is absolute absurd, bombastic nonsense. The fact of the matter is that this country ran into a situation where nobody would give us any money. We had a massive budget deficit.
We should say that you're a former Fine Gael councillor.
I am, yeah, I'm proud of it, and I support Enda Kenny, and I'm not making any messing about. The previous government, unfortunately, found themselves in a horrendous situation, Brian Lenihan and your brother, found themselves in a shocking situation, and the country was basically going bankrupt. Nobody would give us the money to run social welfare, to pay you as a teacher, to pay me as a doctor, or anybody else. And the IMF and the ECB and the EU, England, the Swedes and a number of other people came in here and said, right, we lend you a few quid with obvious conditions.
Yeah, but
and hold on now, Chair.
Bill,
and the fact of the matter is,
I have to challenge you on this, because it is people from these communities who are really suffering as a result
they are,
of all
of course,
those cuts
because you know the alternative. The alternative was to close the country down.
Close the banks down. Not the country, the banks.
The banks had gone bankrupt.
Let them.
If the banks
Why did you make them too big to fail? Why does capitalism make them too big to fail?
I didn't. That was a failure of regulation.
No, but your previous government does, and capitalist government does, until we get a change from that.
It's a failure of regulation.
The fact of the matter is, it's
in prison.
And the bankers.
That is currently.
And if you could hold on to my taxes that I pay,
you can shout all you like, but
people.
if you don't mind, I could say a few things. The bottom line is that
as well.
So do I. The bottom line is that the government and the Dáil and the Oireachtas at the moment is holding a banking inquiry to see exactly where that is. Appreciate say one thing. We've had Draghi say something else in relation to some of the pressure that was put on the government as to whether or not we can take action against in the European courts to get some of the money back. The government in this country is doing a lot of the right things. As you've already pointed out, there has been a demolition of the charges for water. It was very badly handled. It was badly set up. It was badly organised. It was badly monitored in the first place, and I have no doubt about that. And I think that the protest, the big protest, the hundreds of thousands, had the effect of saying to the government, look, the people say that this is seriously wrong, we'll have to re-evaluate what they've done, and the consequences is what Alan Kelly has got to be done. And I'm telling you this, that is listening to people. If anything is...
All right, Sandra, so the government did listen and they did something about it.
Well, they didn't listen, because we said we don't want this Irish water, we don't want privatisation. Across the world they're trying to privatise waters. They've done it in third world countries. Then this banking crisis having go, tell you what, we lend you a few bob if you set up a private that can be privatised within 2 years, and then they'll own a water supply.
We were in huge debt without any banks.
Well, we weren't. The bondholders, we weren't running a deficit. Pre the crash, we were not running a deficit, and that's a mistake. They wanted us to think that was consumerism gone mad. It was never consumerism
but the gap
gone mad.
Between public spending and what was coming in was huge without there being any banking crisis.
Now, come on. Let's get it
straight.
straight.
600 and something billion.
Hold on for a second now. Stop talking.
No, 1 second. I hadn't finished my point.
Stop misleading the people that you are talking to out in
both now,
You are a teacher.
I just wanted to say
about
the tribunals. He's saying to say the tribunals.
You should know what you're talking about. You do not know what you're talking about.
Where's the council seat there now?
All right, where's Mick Murphy? Mick, tell us your story, your involvement in these protests.
First of all, we should say that this thing that Irish Water somehow the rules were changed. They weren't changed. It's only been put back for 4 years. The bills are actually going to be bigger in 4 years' time than they were going to be at this time this year. So nothing has been changed. This plebiscite is a nonsense. So nothing has been changed, in fact. And therein lies the problem. There was massive protests last year, 100,000, 150,000, 70, 80,000, and people are saying the government are listening. They are most definitely not listening.
Okay, but it is fact that since then the number of people turning out for protests has reduced considerably, and there were 100,000 people on the streets last October.
There is no basis to that. See on the 21st of March how many people turned out. There hasn't been any other big protest organised.
65% of people have registered for Irish Water.
Sorry, according to who?
Minister Alan Kelly today.
Minister, of course, yes, on Irish Water. They sent out 2.1 million packs. They got 1 million back, and somehow all of a sudden that's 60-something%. I mean, do you think the rest of us can't count?
So you don't think my question is, you don't think the heat's gone out of all this for people?
Well, for a start, half the population most definitely haven't registered. A lot of who's registered are, for instance, tenants in houses that the landlords registered, and people that don't even know they're registered. So roughly half the people haven't registered months before the bills have even come out. Now, would you like to guess how many aren't going to pay the bill? The poll tax was brought down on the basis of 45% non-payment. We're running at over 50% non-registration. Non-payment is probably going to be way beyond that. And this government knows they're on a sticky wicket in relation to the Water Charter, and nothing they can do to change that at this stage, except they're acting now in desperation. That's why they're arresting people like us, jailing people, and carrying on the way they are.
All right.
They're on a loser, and they're going...
All right, I want to come to Donald O'Keefe here. Donald, we'll get a microphone to you. We heard there that everybody's in agreement on the basics here. You're not.
Hi, Claire. I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago for the journal.ie in which I said that the abuse of the President was, for me, the last straw, but really Jobstown was prior to that. I was sitting on the fence, like I think a lot of people were. I wasn't ideologically opposed to the idea of paying for water. I wasn't happy with the usual bloated quango that we've managed to set up in Irish Water. the fact that we've already sank $500 million into Irish water and not a drop has been metered yet. But Jobstown happened about 2 weeks after you mentioned the big rally in Dublin, the fact that we had over 100,000 people out on the street in a peaceful protest. And the amazing thing is peaceful protests actually work. They frightened the daylights out of the government. And there was a huge climb down on Irish water and on the planned charges.
So what happened with you then? What are you saying?
With me was watching what happened in Jobstown. It was borderline violent. People were injured. People were assaulted. A young woman working for Joan Burton was kicked in the back by protesters.
We don't know that. I mean, I saw footage of people sitting. We don't know that. I mean, I saw footage of people sitting down on the ground. Hunger strikes over the weekend, and what's been happening, what we saw happening in the evening. What's your view of that?
Well, I hope that the hunger strikes are over. I think we all agree nobody wants to see anybody putting their health at risk. I just felt that what happened in Jobstown was, for me, the point. I said, no, look, I'm going to sign.
You're right. Yeah. To our panel now. Barry Cowan is with us. Dan O'Brien is here. Ruth, we spoke to earlier on, Ruth Coppinger and Niamh Harrigan. You're very welcome, all of you. Barry, I'm going to start with you on this. You hear the level of anger there. Fianna Fáil broadly of water charges.
Well, I think first and foremost, your first question of members of the public and to the panel here was what our impressions are of the situation in Cork this evening, of the protests that turned to something else in the past. I think, irrespective of where I stand or where my party stands in relation to water charges, I think first and foremost one has to respect the republic in which we reside, and pivotal to that is the democratic protest. One has a right to protest, of course, but one has to respect the role that the Gardaí has in that process. One has to respect the role that the judiciary have in that process.
So what are you saying that these protesters did wrong? What did they do wrong?
I'm saying, there's a line that you don't cross, unfortunately, and that is breaking the law, and we have to respect that. In this instance, specifically, it relates to disobeying a court order in relation to keeping the distance from those who are doing their daily jobs, which they're entitled to do and earn a living, as many of us are, on a regular basis. But to get back to the point that I'm making, one has to respect the rule of law. One can't go beyond that. If that's the case, the whole thing breaks down. You have to engage in politics, and I welcome that. And I welcome the man who says he got into politics, he became a councillor, he's taken part in the democratic and the political process. And the Oireachtas is sovereign. The Oireachtas will enact law, and it's up to others to enforce law and to attribute
you have to respect
thereafter.
the rule of law, Ruth.
Just want to comment on what seems to be at issue here is if a protest is effective or not. Some of the establishment would like people to go back to the placard carrying protest, where the ministerial car drives by you and that's the end of the matter. The Father Ted protest, it's been called. Down with that sort of thing. But when communities take effective action to stop ministers going about their PR lies and so on, that's another matter. Similarly with the protest tonight. And just to say that there's a government agenda now is to say that this is dwindling, that the numbers are going down. There hasn't been a national protest called since this fabled numbers going down. There will be on March 21st. I think it'll be quite large. But you'll get your irrefutable answer. When those bills come in April and May, nobody will argue with the figures. There will be a massive boycott, I believe, of those bills. And all of the campaigners now, the attention has to be not on a protest, actually, but on persuading those people in the middle not to pay and to join the boycott to get rid of the water charges.
I was talking to a woman today about this from Finglas, and she said to me in 2003 Joe Higgins told her not to pay her bin charges, and she didn't, and she got in big trouble, and she ended up owing €1,000, and she had to pay €35 a week until it was all paid off. And she said, I absolutely support the people who are saying don't pay the water charges, but I'm still going to pay them because I'm going to have to pay them, and I'm going to get in trouble if I don't. Well, what do you say to a woman like that tonight?
I don't know what debt she got into, because in Fingal we had a tag system. Nobody got into debt at all. But what I would say...
She owed €1,000, she paid a €35 off a week. She told me that. She wasn't making it up.
Yeah, no, I know. The government are constantly... Look, you told people to boycott the bin charges. Yeah, and look what happened. The bin charges have gone up by 400%. And people know that we hadn't got the power to defeat the bin tax, but we do have the power to defeat the water charges, which is a much more serious burden on people, and they know it will go the exact same way as the bin charges went. Our tag started out at $3.50. It's now €9.50 plus a standing charge of €110. So people have to learn the lesson from the bin charges. But if we have the power to boycott this without any penalties till July 2016.
All right, okay. John O'Brien, what do you make of all of this?
I'm really perplexed by it. I've been living here for 4 years, and one of the things that foreigners who come here call asking what's going on in Ireland, one of the things they were asking all the time was, why have Irish people been so passive? Why has there been so little protest? You've had this huge recession, and nobody protests. And then suddenly over this issue, there's protest. And frankly, I can't understand why this, is the theory that it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's just not entirely clear to me why this issue, after so many years of incredible passivity, then suddenly led to this really strong reaction.
Niamh, you might have the answer.
I think if you actually look at the early years of the bailout, there was small-scale protest, but I think the key with the water charges issue, if we look at the history of social protest in Ireland, Irish people rally very quickly around issues of community, often faster than societal issues where there can be sluggish protest. And the water charges issue has this unique combination of being about austerity, but at the same time being about community and being something that people can see physically in their own footpaths, on their own doorsteps. And you can see here from the kind of rallying. The other thing that we've seen around some of the cuts that have happened as a consequence of the bailout and austerity is that there are real spatial concentrations now of disadvantage, and that those have actually changed quite significantly since the Celtic Tiger. So there are communities now that have experienced real pain, newer communities, that even those that were the classic kind of marginalised communities of the Celtic Tiger era, and they are mobilising around this issue, and it's really not that surprising.
Well, can I just say, did you predict that? Because that sounds very plausible. But if you predicted that, then fair enough. But it sounds like you're
unfortunately, Dan, I didn't predict the banking crisis, and if I had, I would probably.
Neither did I. But I'm saying, I'd admit I didn't predict the banking crisis. But I'm just saying what you're saying there is absolutely plausible. But if it was so obvious.
Yeah, well, many sociologists said it at the time of the budget in 2011 that we will see, and certainly it was very interesting to look, for instance, at the wind farm protest, which happened at the same period, and again was rallying in rural communities, and again was quite effective.
Dan, could this be about income inequality? I know you say that our incomes are perhaps are more equal, or that wealth is spread more equally than others. But do you think there is an issue in Ireland with this, and that this is causing this problem?
No, I think as a lot of people say, I think there was a woman there who was saying that she just can't, she's worried about having her house repossessed or taken from her. I think it's probably the issue that people just have gone through such a long period, and many people are at breaking point. But I don't think, this notion that sort of conceptually people are looking at how equal society is, because it's a very difficult thing to measure. I don't think people are sort of saying, oh, it's because of inequality.
But Dan, there are real flashpoint issues. If you look at the difference between NAMA and the personal insolvency scheme, there's inequality spelt out really clearly, and how there are two entirely different solutions around the issue of debt for Mr. Joe Soap and Mr. Big Developer. If you look at the issue of justice and the way in which white-collar crime has been dealt with since 2009, and you look at, for instance, the imprisonment of ordinary people for non-payment of fines, which increased, particularly in Cork, funny enough, between 2011 and 2013 quite dramatically. And again, we look at the very, very incredibly sluggish pace of the banking inquiry, the somewhat unsatisfactory outcome of some of the legal cases around this. You can see why people have a perception of two-tier austerity.
If I might say, a huge change was almost expected in 2011 after the general election. You had 2/3 of the corrective measures required in order to bring the public finances back into line were carried out by the previous government. And there was some very tough, decisive measures taken. We could argue about whether they were progressive or regressive. I would say they were progressive in comparison to what has come since. But there was an expectation.
A lot of what this government did was fall policy.
Well, look, the final third was carried out by this government. But prior to today getting into office, during the course of the election, they gave this distinct impression to the electorate that there was a softer or an easier way in which the gap could be closed. And people bought into that. Now, they bought rightly or wrongly. They did buy into that, and they did not believe that they were heading down the line very similar to what had been put forward in the 4-year plan and the range of options that was there to bring about the correction. Having said that, that being the case, the public now see the situation whereby they have been you know, they have not lived up to the expectations that was expected of them, and us and them are pooled into the one source, and people are looking for alternatives, and some of those alternatives are to the left and some very far to the left. But I would ask those people who engage in that process to engage in the political process, to come on board politics, play, you know, get before the people, put yourself before the electorate, and allow you enact differences and allow the Oireachtas to be sovereign.
We might be sorry that you said that.
But I mean, that's active participation in the democratic process.
I would like to see that as well, Claire. Arising from this huge movement against the water charges, there has to be a broader political alternative to the austerity parties.
Well, we can have that.
And I would encourage all of the campaigns to come together in the next months to discuss how we can field a slate of candidates around the country against Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Labour.
Okay,
yeah, but you have to remember
I want to move
also
this on now and talk to Dan about what might change this. And, you know, we hear the economy is improving, due to grow by 3 or 4% this year. If we have more jobs, will it ease some of the tensions in this area, do you think?
I think it's more about higher pay. So I think it's only when the labour market sort of tightens, unemployment comes down, and then pay starts rising. And we just haven't seen that. So most of the indicators in the economy are saying, good, things are going in the right direction. But one of the few things that hasn't started going in the right direction is pay. It's still sort of flat as a pancake.
It's down.
And it has been over a number of years.
Well, CSO will tell you it's down.
The CSO figures say flat.
But it's down so €7, actually.
If that starts changing and people actually start earning more money, and then that pressure that, you know, again, that woman was talking about earlier on, that pressure then will begin to ease. And that would seem to me to be the main thing.
We have lots of hands up in our audience. Want to come back? Do you want to come back in there, first of all? Yeah.
I want to know how you can sit and say that the economy is
We'll just get a microphone to you.
That, you know, we're not much austerity anymore. Well, I'll give you an example. I don't own my house, by the way. I'm only privately renting, so I don't think I'll ever own my house. But I don't get how, if things are on the up, when we were looking for help with our rent, we went to the social welfare, and my partner was told, do you know what, you're better off going on the dole and getting rent allowance. You're better off giving up your job that you have, that he's not earning anything really, but he's out all hours trying to keep a roof over our heads. And we walked in looking, you know, could we have a little bit of help? You're better off going on the dole. That was what the man sitting behind that desk told him, to go on the dole, sign on the dole and claim rent allowance. Now, and that's how we would be able to pay your rent.
Doesn't that fit with what you were writing in the paper of last few days?
That's with 2 small children. Like, that's what he told us to do. And my partner was to go out and hand in his notice, wait for the time to get the dole.
All right.
And we'd get rent allowance.
OK, Dan.
Well, you know, in my article in Sunday Independent yesterday, I was saying that there is a question about how the welfare system interacts, and does it at times, and it's something that we don't know enough about in terms of when it can say to people, it's not worth your while working. And I'm simply saying we need to understand more about how that mechanism works.
We do actually understand quite a bit. I mean, Helen Johnson did a huge report on jobless households last year, and one of the things that we know is that basically we have quite a high number of jobless households here in Ireland, and it's partly the way our welfare and tax system interacts sometimes does mitigate against people retaining and having. And our medical card system in particular, the threshold at which people lose their medical cards is a significant factor. But I think another issue, Claire, is actually while the economy is going in the right direction, it's simply the scale of job creation is not good enough. For instance, to what the government is saying, they're all the time talking about labour and job activation, and we're seeing jobs being activated, but they're less than 30,000, where you've got 380,000 on the live
register. The broad rate of
Okay.
unemployment is actually 21% rather than 12%, because it doesn't. That takes into account the activation measures and the part-time. Because it doesn't. That takes into account the activation measures and the part-time jobs and so forth.
Stephen O'Byrne, I mean, what we're hearing from members of the audience who are taking part in these protests is that they're just sick of it. They've just had enough.
I can understand that, but on the other hand, I don't think that where we've got to now is reasonable. I think it's absolutely anti-democratic what's being. Leading question for Ruth.
Sorry, what's that?
I said in relation to the kind of protests that are proceeding now, they're absolutely anti-democratic. And I would have one leading absolutely anti-democratic. And I would have one leading question for you, protest in Cork being on behalf of the fact that a number of working class people had been imprisoned, and that's why that protest had taken place. How can you reconcile a campaign that's being waged on behalf of working class people, as you describe it, with the fact that you're also stopping ordinary working class people doing their job one day after the other, and that they're being intimidated, and also that the Gardaí are being bullied, and that they're being harassed, and that they're being called pricks in uniform, scumbags, all that kind of stuff. How do you condone those two actions? Stopping ordinary working class people working every day,
all right,
and
we get
intimidating
your point, Stephen.
and bullying Gardaí.
Well, first of all, I haven't been on any protest where that kind of language has been used by me. By me or my colleagues.
We all see them online. We saw them online too.
You seem to attribute everything to the Anti-Austerity Alliance, and would that we had that control over everything in Ireland. But can I just say, the workers for Irish Water are being put, yes, in an invidious position of they obviously need work, but also the community do not want the meters that they're installing. And at some point, if you're doing a job, you have to consider the consequences of it. These meters
lots of people are happy for the meters going in. I don't know if you heard on Lifeline today.
I don't know anyone who's happy for the meters to go in. I'd say they're a tiny minority.
Lots of people are not protesting about this. While there are lots of people protesting, there are lots of people not protesting. I heard on Lifeline today a man who worked for Irish Water saying that people have left the job, people had their faces covered because their pictures were going up on Facebook. These are ordinary workers who are installing these meters. I mean, what do you say about that?
I have been on protests, peaceful protests with these workers. And they also have to consider that if the community doesn't like what they're doing, they also have to consider whether they want to continue doing it. And can I just say that there's a housing crisis out there. Most of these are building workers. My own brother has had to emigrate. He's a building worker as well.
I know, but
people
don't like the guys. Ruth, people who don't like the guys who hand out parking fines, but you can't go around abusing them and stopping them from doing their work.
These workers could be put to use fixing the pipes, the 41% national leakage rate, or building homes, which we need, which is why the likes of Caroline there, her rent is going up because there isn't any housing in working class communities and all over the country.
Yeah, just to say, listen, I for one, within the political process, have opposed the setting up of Irish Water tooth and nail, have opposed the various
But Fianna Fáil were in favour of water charges.
Yeah, well, I want to correct that too, if you don't mind, now that you give me the opportunity to do so. Fianna Fáil, signed up to a set of targets to reduce the public deficit, 3% GDP, okay, as did other parties. And there was a range of options by which they may do that. They achieved 2/3 of that closure without bringing in water charges. This government have achieved the other third without bringing in water charges. The Irish Water and its setup was born within the Fine Gael organisation in 2009 by Simon Coveney and enacted by this government. And I've opposed it. I respect the right of those who work within it to do their job on a regular basis, as is the case for anybody else who is democratically entitled to do their work. No, I'm after telling you.
There's a gentleman in our audience.
We signed up to a range of options. We achieved 2/3 of we achieved 2/3, and this government have achieved 1/3 of it.
Are you in favour of abolishing?
I'm not necessarily in favour of abolishing them. I'm in favour of only asking the people to make a contribution when the system is fit for purpose, and it's not fit for purpose.
Okay, there's a man there with his hand raised for quite some time. We'll get a microphone to you. Thank you for your patience. Go ahead.
Thank you, Claire. Could we get back to the kernel of the issue? The government have been dishonest and now they're being unfair. I would not be part of the loony left. I would be considered conservative, right, because of my profession in life. Now, I marched on the 8th of December in Dublin and I had to come all the way from Kerry. But what I would like to say is the government were dishonest. They said we can't have free water. Now, the council workers who were looking after the water last year and the year before are still looking after the water. They're now under the umbrella of Irish Water. Those workers were paid last year and the year before by our taxes. We never had free water. I'd love to know if they could tell us in what decade we had free water.
So you feel you're going to be asked to be paid twice?
Be honest. We didn't have free water. Now, that's where they're being dishonest, the government. Where they're being unfair. The system we had before, central government, our taxes, paid for the water.
Okay.
Now, widows, widowers, pensioners, single mothers, old people have to find the money for a bill every quarter. Whereas when the collective units paid for water, it was fair. So they're being dishonest.
All right.
And they're unfair.
Okay. Are you going to go out and protest again?
If I get the opportunity, I protested at home in Tralee. And as I said, I wouldn't be considered a loony left. Definitely.
All right. All right.
And I mean,
I think there are lots of people who might object to that description. Very briefly.
98% of the people who marched in the different marches were peaceful. Why are we talking about the 2%?
Okay. I want to bring you there.